Order. I just want to verify, does anyone need more executive time, or are we good? Consensus is that we're good? Okay, so we'll just have to wait until 7 to start the public meeting. So independent study time and for a few minutes here until we begin the public meeting at 7. Thank you. We'll call this meeting to order for USD 348 Board of Education back in public session. May I have an approval for the consent agenda? Is there a second? Susan has moved and Phil has seconded approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed? 7-0. Okay, moving on to recognitions. This one, and let me see. Oh, she's here. Hi, Jeanette. We thought celebrating Sewist in September just had a certain ring to it. And as such, we have a presentation to make tonight for the face mask for Baldwin City. And Jeanette Blackmar is here to represent that. It's not just an organization, it's a collaborative coming together of several entities here in Baldwin who have just done some really extraordinary things during this time for which the school district and the entire community have benefited from. And we really wanted to shine a light on that with lots of gratitude. The face mask for Baldwin City, just as a little bit of information, includes the Lumberyard Arts Center as sort of its home base, and their board, led by President Sam Cheek. Jeanette is the executive director at the Lumberyard. And this idea has been a collaboration that includes fabric donations from Quilters Paradise, funding from Douglas County Community Foundation, partnership with the Baldwin City Library, the Baldwin Chamber. This includes, as of August 10th, and this might be a bit outdated, as of August 10th, 60 community sewists who have contributed face masks, 21 volunteers. As of August 10th, and I know the amount has gone up since then, 7,115 masks made for the Baldwin community. And of that, 1,922 were donated to USD 348. 102 of those were toddler sized. 620 were sized for a small child. 220 were adult sized. And Mr. Dorothy was able to go and pick those up as a gift to get our school year started off with that generosity. And so in summary, it's hard to summarize all of the work and coordination that has gone into empowering community volunteers, but in a streamlined way. But for all the things that I just missed in that very brief description, on behalf of the board, we want to say this. The Baldwin City Board of Education of USD 348 supports and promotes excellence in all school activities. On this day, September 21st, 2020, the Board of Education recognizes and congratulates Face Mask for Baldwin City in appreciation of the generous contribution of masks to USD 348 and the Baldwin City community. Please join me in giving a round of applause to Jeanette that she can pass on, and we have a certificate for you to take back to hopefully display at the Lumberyard Arts Center. Thank you, Jeanette, and Face Mask for Baldwin City. That is wonderful. This is so much fun to do when we get to do things like this. Also, this is not on the agenda, but just another quick plug of recognition, because I forgot to do this at the end of our last meeting, and that's probably when it could have been used most. Just ongoing thanks to staff for all the hard work you're doing. Ongoing thanks to board members for all the hard work you are doing. We may not always see everything the same way, but I'm really, really proud of how we listen to each other respectfully And I think that's an important example. And I didn't say thank you last time, and I didn't want to miss another opportunity to do that. So thank you. All right, moving on. Public comment. I don't believe we have anyone in person for public comment this evening. However, we did have some electronic comments submitted that we want to make sure and get to. And I also wanted to review our policy on public comment, just so that we're clear moving forward. And I didn't do as good of a job as I wish I would have at the last meeting, but we live and we learn. Thank you, Jeanette. Bye. I just want board members to be aware of our policy about public comment. Everyone can look this up for themselves, but I think it's good to say, especially since we don't have people here tonight, that it's not in reaction to anything. It's policy that we have in place. But if we have a lot of public comment, our policy does allow for a representative of a certain point of view to speak. And if that point of view has been represented, we can see who else agrees, and then you move on to another point of view. We've never needed to really utilize that, and I'm not suggesting that we do that, particularly when we have a special meeting. I think it was really important for everyone to have their opportunity to say whatever they needed to say, even if there were components of that were similar. But when we have a regular board meeting, it is important that we attend to the business of the entire district. And so if we need to do that, I just wanted to bring that in front of the board. I want you guys to think about that. I have some mixed feelings. There's an efficiency aspect of that if we have 100 people show up for public comment that might be useful to think about, but I also don't want to do anything that silences anyone's voice. It wouldn't be outside of policy to do that, but that's not a move I would want to make without you all thinking about that and weighing in. We don't need to decide that tonight, but think about that. It is within policy to do that. The other thing in our policy, just as a procedural thing moving forward, because I do think there was some confusion about that. In terms of engagement, the spokesperson delivered the group's message. Okay, except to ask clarifying questions, board members shall not interact with speakers during the open forum. So in case there was any question about what am I supposed to do, public comment is the opportunity for our patrons to have their say. Our rule is 5 minutes, and it's not only in our policy, but it's also suggested from KASB as well, that we not engage, that we take what we hear during public comment, and then we discuss that during the body of our discussion time. So for those for whom that might have been confusing, it's not that we're ignoring, it's that we're following procedures. Okay, so with that, going to go ahead and read the electronic comments that came in the order in which I received them. The first one is from Jennifer Fulton. Good evening. Thank you for taking time to listen to my concern. My name is Jennifer Fulton, and I have a son who is a freshman in the high school. I understand that the situation in our community and school are always changing, and I appreciate the time and hard work you as a board has put into keeping our kids and teachers safe. I am hearing that the board is contemplating returning to school to 5 days a week as opposed to the current hybrid model. I would like to share my concerns/comments on that. While I would like my son to have a more traditional and normal freshman year, I feel like making this move so soon into the semester will be irresponsible and dangerous. The current hybrid model is new, and I would like us to continue that model to help ensure that we are following all safety and health suggestions by the CDC. As you know, minimizing the amount of students in the school at one time helps to minimize the spread of COVID and other illnesses for that matter. Putting the students back full-time will lead to less social distancing and increase the chance that students, teachers, and staff will contract COVID. At the point that happens, then school will be shut down and everyone will have to go to virtual learning, which is what most, including myself, do not want for their children. If the school board does decide to change the initial plan that they presented to our community and return to full-time in-person school, then they must be prepared to allow parents to change the selection of how their student is taught, even though the deadline for choosing for this semester is passed. You cannot expect everyone to feel the same about the safety of their students and families, to say the same if you are changing the initial agreement that you made. Thank you for your consideration, Jennifer Fulton. And still nobody here from the public. Okay, I will move on to the next public comment, which is number 2. This one is from Carrie Barth. Hello, USD 348 board members and Mr. Dorothy. My name is Carrie Barth, and I am mom to 2 high school daughters at BHS. My husband and I moved here 16 years ago to raise our kids in the Baldwin School District, and we love our community, and thank you for your service. Thank you for deciding at last week's special board meeting to allow spectators to attend events in Baldwin. I have also heard some positive adjustments have been made to help the cheer team to address the space they use for practice, and I appreciate that as well. I look forward to hearing how those changes have helped my cheerleader daughter when she has practice this week. I spoke at last week's special board meeting and the board meeting before that, questioning the way Douglas County Public Health is calculating the number of positive COVID cases based on the number of people being tested and using this number as the primary metric for the gating criteria for in-person school and sports. The current way this is calculated is skewed, subjective, and flawed and needs to be changed. I mentioned looking at a bigger picture of metrics such as hospital capacity of beds, ICU and ventilators, school attendance, etc. I was so glad Dan Partridge with Douglas County Public Health was there in person last week to speak with the board, and glad our board was able to ask questions. I have called him multiple times and have never heard back from him. It became obvious during last week's meeting that the metrics being used by Douglas County Public Health had many hours spent coming up with the methodology they are using, but it also became apparent that Douglas County Public Health is looking through a narrow lens that is filtered for an agenda that is not necessarily in the best interest of our kids in the county. I have found over the years that when people spend so much time on something that even if it is wrong, they feel married to it and will continue using a poor method even if there is another and better way. Last week, I saw a board further open the door for this conversation, asking questions about data and transparency. Our kids deserve it, and with advocacy, positive change will happen. Dr. Christine White is a pediatrician in Kansas with Johnson County Pediatrics. She has been sharing her expertise as a physician and making recommendations to her kids' school district in Kansas, to Johnson County, and recently was asked to present to the state of Kansas economic recovery at the Kansas State Capitol last week. I recommend you watch the 34-minute presentation posted on YouTube as she lays out the facts and makes comprehensive recommendations about in-person school for kids, along with criteria she and other pediatricians have come up with for a new gating criteria. I too think it makes sense as it takes a more comprehensive approach. Here is the link to Dr. White's YouTube video, and this email has been forwarded to all the board members. I'd like to see school be 5 days per week in person for all grades. That's in all caps. If there is any way possible for next semester. The hybrid model is not ideal for teachers, kids, parents, or administrators. At least the Acellus model offers continuity of education, but it too is not ideal for us parents that want our kids to have the high school experience and socialization. We are all trying to make it work and do our best with the situation, but I want better. I want to raise the bar, and I want USD 348 to be the district other districts want to be like and lead by example. I want our district to keep teachers and kids safe and at the same time let them be in the classroom doing what they love, teaching kids in person and letting kids be kids. Last week as a board, you discussed parents made decisions for our kids' hybrid or virtual school based on the Douglas County Public Health gating criteria. However, we had to make our enrollment choices by August 14th, and we were not sent the gating criteria from USD 348 until a date that was after the 14th. We all had to make this decision somewhat blindly, and I do think there is some wiggle room here based on the fact that gating criteria was provided after we made enrollment decisions on hybrid or virtual. Thank you again for your time and consideration. Carrie Barth. Okay, the next one in order is from, signed from Leanne and Joe Bathke. Any people in public? No? Okay. Starting time. To the USD 348 School Board. These are difficult, extraordinary times, and we appreciate the steps the USD 348 School Board was taking to ensure the safety of everyone in our district. We appreciate that you were looking at county health recommendations and following real science, not someone's crazy keyboard rantings on social media. That you were letting USD 348 patrons and taxpayers know that, although the new school year would be different, USD 348 was doing everything possible in regard to safety in the middle of a global pandemic. In August, after much thought, research, and discussion, our family decided to let our son go to school on the hybrid schedule. While we were disappointed that cohorts wouldn't be organized in the high school, we thought the small class sizes, enforced masking, county gating restrictions, and other precautions were at least adequate. Not great, but adequate with plenty of thought and consideration for all involved. The USD 348 School Board gave direction at their last meeting that we were to follow the county gating recommendations, in quotes, ... all parent email from USD 348, August 28th, 2020. In quotations again. What is very important is that everyone needs to do their part to keep the schools opened and operating, end quote. This from all parent email from USD 348, August 18th, 2020. Then the school board started backing away from these plans with athletics, placing all hybrid students at risk. Parents wanting to change to fully remote were informed it was too late. That, quote, we have to hold enrollment choices where they are in order to maintain the plan approved by the school board and the Education Unified Command, end quote. This was from an all-parent email from USD 348 dated September 3rd, 2020. New paragraph. This felt like the beginning of a slippery slope. As we see it, first allowing sports in the yellow, now allowing limited spectators, walks back the plans you assured all of the district parents, students, teachers, and other employees you would follow. Now I hear there are parents advocating for sports and activities to continue even if the county gating criteria is in orange, and for sending every student back to school 5 days a week this semester. A school board member stated to float the idea about allowing in-school classes during orange during the September 15th meeting, but dropped the motion. School board is scheduled to take up playing sports in orange at the September 21st meeting. Text from a school board member and comment from a district employee, September 20th, 2020. Parent comments, text, and social media. Okay, this reference, I'm sorry, I'm not reading that right. Text from a school board member and comment from a district employee, September 20, 2020. Parent comments, text, and social media post, September 15th, 2020. If our family had known that every aspect of the plan was up for debate in August, our decision would have been different. We have heard from many parents that their kids are thriving and feel much safer in the smaller class sizes at the high school. That, although social distancing seems to be hit or miss, masking is very consistent. We don't know if you're hearing from these parents. You should be. In conclusion, we want our school board to keep to the promises they made before school began. We want the gating criteria followed. We want BHS seniors to have a great final year in their public high school. We want the hybrid option for fall 2020 to continue safely through this semester. We want our teachers and other school employees to feel confident that the school board has their backs when it comes to their safety during a global pandemic. And we want every person who walks into a USD 348 school building to care about everyone else walking into a USD 348 school building. Principles mean nothing if we don't stick to them when it's inconvenient to do so. As the pressure mounts to engage in activities that would be unsafe for district students and employees, now is the time it has become inconvenient, and now is the time for the school board to adhere to its principles. Quote, a basic principle of the law and of everyday fairness is that we apply rules with consistency and not based on what's convenient or advantageous in the moment. The rule of law, the legitimacy of our courts, the fundamental workings of our democracy all depend on that basic principle, end quote. President Barack Obama, remembering Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, September 18th, 2020. Thanks for your dedication and attention. It is appreciated. Leanne and Joseph Bathke. P.S. I had planned to attend school board meetings in person once I heard about these changes, but I am currently under COVID restrictions at home, quarantined away from my family. People will tell you that I have been beyond diligent and very annoying about following COVID protocol. I still was exposed to COVID by a Baldwin City resident in Baldwin City in public. This person is currently dealing with the repercussions of this disease, and though I have no symptoms so far, I do not want to be responsible for spreading it to other people if I am asymptomatic and contagious. Leanne Bathke. All right, and still no one here. All right, so here's the last one. And this is from Deborah Marsh. I imagine you are making decisions tonight about the spring semester being offered either hybrid and online versus completely online. I am writing to share very mature comments made by my BHS senior last night when I asked her about her preference. Listed below are her comments. Number 1, I would rather attend hybrid and not see all my friends at school for the safety and well-being of all the students. Attending hybrid gives the students at least some sense of normal. Number 2, if given the opportunity to attend every day, I would still opt for hybrid to lessen exposure and the chance of going completely online. Number 3, I feel hybrid is a brilliant idea at BHS because less than half the student body is in attendance, which means less exposure. Right now, we are spread out and hallways and stairs are practically empty. Number 4, I am so impressed by everyone's, in parentheses, students, teachers, staff, in parentheses, willingness to wear a mask all the time. I really feel safe. Number 5, if school were completely online, it would not be good for my well-being or mental health. My grades would suffer and I would be very depressed. The spring semester was a horrible experience for me, both academically, physically, and emotionally. Thank you for letting me share her thoughts. Deborah Marsh. I see no other record prior to 7 p.m. of any other public comments that came in. We're good? Okay. I believe that concludes the public comment portion of our meeting. And since we don't have people in attendance, officers, thank you for being here tonight. Let's give them a round of applause too. Unless you just want to stay because this is so exciting, you're of course welcome to. It is a public meeting, but because we didn't have a lot of attendance tonight, if you have other places to be, we thank you for your service, and it's okay if you go if you need to be elsewhere. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to financial report. We are going to hear about the ionizer bid. As board members remember, this was something we talked about as we prepared for the school year, and there was a lot of research about how to address filtration systems as part of our mitigation efforts. And here to talk to us more about that with the finance piece of that is Cindy Frick, Director of Financial Operations.
Thank you. We did open bids on Friday and had 2 responses. The low bid was from A&H Air Conditioning and Heating. That was for $94,158.75. And they are providing and installing the bipolar ionization on the HVAC equipment, and this is district-wide. The second bid was from P1 Group for $121,865.32. After speaking with Wilden, they are recommending, in agreement with us, they reviewed the bids for us on this particular project and did recommend the low bid from A&H.
Do board members have questions about this or a revisiting of how this technology works?
My only question, and I don't know if anyone knows, but did they say it was going to take about 6 weeks to put in, if I remember right?
There were some different lead times on that, but Wilden included that on the bid. So I can tell you for A&H, the work is planned to begin and end within the month of November. With the other bid, it was going to start earlier but take longer, so it would still be towards the end of November when it was done.
Other questions? I move we accept the bid from A&H for $94,158.75. It's been moved and seconded. Carrie seconded. Megan. All those in favor of accepting this bid, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? 7-0. Thank you, Cindy. All right, curriculum oversight. This involves quite a few things. Dr. Craig Hare, Director of Curriculum and Assessment here for the district, is going to talk to the board about several curriculum issues, just kind of touching base, not only with our on-site instruction as it pertains to curriculum, but of course now there's an added layer to the work she is doing with our remote curriculum, and she's going to visit with us about that. Thank you, Jan.
Hey, we are 9 days into remote learning, and so I just wanted to give you some information, a little bit of data about what's going on with our remote learning program right now. We have 410 students that are enrolled in remote learning. That is about 31% of all of our students across the district. For a specific breakdown on that, it's 102 at the primary center, 105 at the intermediate center, 109 at the junior high, and 94 at the high school. So a pretty good breakdown between all the buildings. So far, as of about 4 o'clock tonight, our remote learners have logged 8,815 hours of curriculum work online. So that's really, really good. It does average out to about 2.3 hours a day. So they are kind of staying within that range that we had wanted to not have too much screen time. The other piece of this is that it really does take a village. This is not being done in isolation. I know our parents are heavily involved. They're planning additional activities for their kids. They're getting together and figuring out some additional field trips and play dates and things to keep their kids engaged and socially involved together. But then it also takes our staff members, and we have about 24 staff members that are really involved in leading this and supporting our students. With that, we have 4 full-time at the elementary level, so full-time, pulled out of the classroom that are just supporting remote learners. We have 5 junior high teachers that have release time to do this, along with the library aide. So they're supporting our kids, they're doing check-ins with the kids, they're calling kids, they're doing other ways of connecting with our students. At the high school, we have 4 high school teachers with remote or with release time. We also have 3 social studies teachers that are giving up some of their seminar time to support our remote learners. And then we have the library aide, and we also have the assistant principal. So we have multiple check-in times. The students should have the flexibility to check in when it's convenient for them, but also be able to have the access to teachers when they need that. Let's see. What else do we have here? Running out there. We also have our 4 principals. So the 4 main principals, besides the assistant principal at the high school, the 4 main principals have also been involved with calling students, calling parents, and kind of doing those check-ins and making sure that our kids are okay. At the high school level, we have 74 courses that are being offered, and this is really exciting because we have a lot of courses out there that just have 1 student in them. So we have a lot of things they're doing for credit recovery. So students that maybe missed like a second semester, they maybe didn't do so well, and now they need to retake that course. So we have them in like an algebra class for second semester. So they're taking a math class first semester and also the one that they didn't do so well in from last semester. So they're doing the credit recovery process there. They're actually getting back on track. So we look at this as a time during a national pandemic when we could be having kids fall further behind, that maybe we can use this time to actually catch them up and get them back on track. So that's a really positive thing for us. Also, with all of those courses being offered, it's really a piece of equity that we're really giving students what they need. Not necessarily saying everybody gets this, but we're giving them what they need. Along with that, we have some CTE courses that are being offered. We have students taking plumbing technology, HVAC technology, and electrical technology. And those are courses that we haven't been able to offer before. We also have 17 students that are enrolled in medical terminology. So that's part of our new health sciences pathway. So that's kind of exciting that we were able to go ahead and get that started. At the junior high level, we have 46 students that are enrolled in Introduction to Spanish. So we've never been able to offer that many. We've usually had one class section of Intro to Spanish just because of our resources and our teacher access. Elementary students are now being able to have choices, and they have some electives they can be involved in. They can have coding, there's a Foundations of Music class, Introduction to Spanish, and Elementary Engineering class. So that's kind of exciting. Some of the parents have commented that they like it because their kids can have choices now in some of their courses. We've also been exploring a little bit and looking at differentiation. So we've noticed there's a change mode for our students. So if our students are struggling in one of the classes, then we can increase the rigor or we can reduce the rigor. And what happens then is the students still get the same lesson that everybody else gets, but then when they're presented the problem questions, they may get a little bit easier problem questions or harder problem questions. So we've adjusted, our teachers have actually adjusted some of the coursework that way. The other thing we've looked at is looking at the goals for students. So when a seller sets the goals, it looks at how many lessons the course has, and then our start date and our end date, and they just say you should do this many lessons per week, and that keeps you on target. And some of our students were finishing their goal by Wednesday. It's like they still have the rest of the week to go, and the parents would say, hey, we want this to be a little bit more challenging for kids, so we would increase the goals. So instead of 20 activities, we would say, let's do 25 activities, or let's do 30 activities, and just kind of bump it up a little bit, so that also keeps kids engaged. The parents did say that when they finish for the week, they think they're finished, so we want them to keep doing more. Let's see. The other thing we've had is our teachers that have been working with the students have had some small group sessions. Our kindergarten teacher said she noticed that some of the kids were having trouble with the M sound. So when they went through that lesson, they were having trouble with it. So she pulled a small group together and just did a separate session with them. Mrs. Cooper at the junior high also did the same thing on one of the math concepts that several kids were having trouble with. So she just pulled a small group together and did that during her release time. Let's see. Oh, this one was an exciting one too. Our students noticed that their grades and GPA were not being reported correctly in the cells. So they actually, and this is exciting because they're noticing their grades were not right. They're interested in their grades, they're making sure they're monitoring that, they're being very self-directed in it. So they said, yeah, this isn't right, my GPA shouldn't be this because here's my grades. So they're calculating it, they're sending this to me, we're doing all the different calculations. What we figured out is the cellist was counting in an attendance score. So if students logged in, it counted as attending that day, and they were figuring that into the grade. So with the students' help, we were actually able to take out the attendance, take out the special lessons, and it's just calculated on their problems and their tests that they're doing. So we kind of changed that grading piece to more accurately represent the work they were doing. We also noticed that the grade level scale did not match our grade level scale. If we have an A is 4.0, B is 3.0, they were doing it on the plus-minus scale, so that was messing with the students' GPAs a little bit, so we did have to change that scale back to also. And an interesting one was Discover Spanish, we learned, was all in Spanish. It was an immersion program, so the instructor talked on the first episode in English that we could all understand, and everything else after that was in Spanish. So, which was interesting, but maybe not what the parents were looking for in a Spanish class. So we did have to get that one switched, and there was another Intro to Spanish class that we were able to switch kids over to after that first day. The other nice thing is that our parents have access to monitor the students. So we have that piece working so the parents can sign up. I mean, they're also right there with the students so they can see the student screen, but the parent portal actually gives you a little bit different view of what the students have been working on. And then finally, the thing that happened last Monday was KSDE changed the requirements on the learning log. Thank goodness. So parents don't have to do the learning log where they have to record 360 minutes of learning activities every day. Now they just have to do an assurances form. And so we sent that information out to parents on Tuesday. We have 319 of our 410 learners have already completed that. So there's about 57 families that we're going to have to follow up on, but otherwise they've all pretty much done that. So that's good. And that's part of our funding piece of it. We have to have the daily contact log, which is where our teachers have been checking in with the students and where they check in with their Zoom calls, and then we have to have the assurances. And that's what our funding is based off of at this point. Okay, there's a quick overview. Anybody have questions?
So my question, or my issue with the SLS is the reports that we've had in the beginning and then following through with the questions in the program that show sexism, racism, and then I've looked into those, and then the company has addressed them, but have we heard any more about that?
We have been receiving periodical updates on just the things that they're doing to improve the program, improve the content, and take out any questionable material. So, and then the other piece is that when we did find something that was questionable, it was in that kindergarten program, and we submitted that back to Acellus, and it's not there anymore. So we know that they did remove that. So they're being active in removing things that, that are questionable.
And also that this has come through our reporting mechanism, but just so the public knows, Janet, can you speak to, because I know this was addressed in professional development as well. So much has happened over the last month, it's hard to keep track of when we last talked about this, but if you could talk a little bit more of how you addressed this issue in the online parent meeting. There was full transparency. Hey, we've identified some problems, we're on it. And could you speak to how we were right out in front on that, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. So it was the week of our parent meetings that we received a press release or a news article from, it was a news source in Hawaii, that Hawaii is using Acellus as one of their online programs, along with 2 other programs that they were having districts choose from, or their schools choose from. And we received news that some of the parents had found offensive content in the Acellus program. And so we received that information. We looked at what they were saying was offensive. We looked into the program to find if we could see these exact examples, which we could not find those. And then we just said, we will proactively take a look at this as soon as we have our teachers back on contract, which is that next following week, I believe. And then we talked to the teachers about what's been in the newspaper about Acellus, what content teachers or parents were finding that was offensive, and said, we need you to review the curriculum materials that's assigned to you, and if there's anything that's offensive, or if a parent reports anything that's offensive, then just let us know and we'll send it back to Acellus. So that's kind of been our process as we've gone through it. We did tell them about specific examples that were cited in some of the different news articles, and then just kind of went from there. And like I said, the only thing we've found so far has been a kindergarten example.
And the ongoing expectation, regardless of what format our education takes, is that, and I've used this example several times, it's kind of silly, but if you have a textbook, Pluto may be a planet this year, it may not. It's always the teacher's responsibility based on what's in that textbook to make sure, oh, it has it down as planet. Actually, guys, it's not. Like, that's always the teacher's responsibility to be reviewing that and have that level of oversight. And of course, that extends to our online learners as well. Do other board members have any questions about this, or how this topic can interface with other areas of our work?
Yeah, mine's more of a comment, but I just wanted to share my appreciation for the teachers who are leading these remote sessions here. That's the repetitive theme I keep hearing from parents. This is a great learning platform, but what really ties it all together is the teachers reading the data, interacting with our students or our children, and leading those multiple times a day conversations. That's been the kind of tie that binds as our great teachers kind of make all seem a little bit less foreign and weird and remote, and make it a little bit more personal. So kudos to them.
Yes, very much. They've been doing really great with it. It's almost like we have all of our students on an IEP. There's an individual plan for everyone. There's maybe a handful of students that have the same learning plan. Everybody else is always a little bit different for. And we just said we're going to do whatever the students need, which is a really crazy endeavor, but we're doing what the students need. And our teachers have been there doing that too.
Now, when Kelly talks about the teacher will review the material and so forth, there's some material that I would like to review for my child, specifically in social studies, but it won't let a parent review those lessons. Is there a way to do that?
contact your teacher, because there is a way to do that on the teacher side of it. They can go into a teacher, called a teacher, team teacher view, where the teacher can actually review every single thing the students see. And when they set that up, then they can do that as the teacher view. So yeah, they could walk you through that piece of it. Parents can see the syllabus, but you see the topics of the lessons, you don't see the actual lesson unless you're in there in that team view.
Because I have done quite a bit of research through about other things that have come up besides what we have looked at, and there's quite a bit out there, more so. I listened to one of the board meetings for Hawaii the other day, and there is quite a bit out there. And then San Diego, some schools there adopted, I think Delaware, and then Peoria almost did, but they didn't. I think it's worth us looking into it more, maybe researching it, maybe having the diversity committee look at it, or starting a committee to look at it. I think that it definitely is worth it. There's some really, the person, Roger Billings, who runs it, he has just some stuff in his own public stuff that is a little bit questionable, and I think that we should look at it a little bit deeper.
I think, to me, the Acellus is an online textbook, and then it gets treated like any other textbook, that we just review the content and just make sure it is appropriate for our students, because we're making those local decisions. I know there was one course that the teacher seemed a little questionable on. I think that was the social emotional. I think we kind of questioned that one a little bit, and we're not offering that one to our students. Right? So we just said that's not available, and we're not going there. So we've made those choices, and I think it gives us those options to be able to do that. So I know like the AP courses are approved by College Board, so someone else has already vetted those, but we can still look through those to make sure that that content is what we need, even though it's already a curriculum that's prescribed basically by College Board. We want to make sure that still meets what our students need to be able to pass those tests.
And again, all of this was addressed in our professional development time prior to the school year, just so we have that out there for the public's knowledge as well.
Yes.
In terms of how, yeah, okay.
Yes, we addressed this with the teachers, and so they were prepared to look through with a fine-tooth comb to see things that might not be appropriate or might not be what we need for our kids here in Baldwin.
Well, so for Carrie's point and request for our equity committee, I know you all are still sort of finding your way in terms of developing your charge. I know you've discussed, or at least reported back to the board, that part of the ideas that you've had to look at is how equity issues interface with curriculum and how to do that in a meaningful way. So having this on the radar would probably be appropriate if that's something you guys could kick around as well. Do any other board members have? Susan, I think I see her fire. I can tell now. People are firing up the mic. Susan, she'll hold on.
Keep mine on. My initial thought is just we as a board are not responsible for the choosing of curriculum. We as a board are looking at how can our administrators and our teachers, how can we support them with tools or resources such as the National Equity Committee that had that rubric. But I don't think it's within our realm to choose curriculum. Absolutely, we should look at it and ensure that it's safe and equitable and accessible to all of our students. But
oops, sorry. Thank you, Susan. Anybody else? Carrie?
I will give an example. That I saw yesterday of Roger Billings, the founder, which this is not in the curriculum, but it troubled me that this was the person overseeing the material. He and one of the women who do a lot of the classes and so forth, the social emotional woman, they were doing a video for Acellus, and they were sitting next to each other. He pushed a button that caused wind to go through her hair, and she laughed, and she said, I want that button to blow your hair. And he said, oh yeah, that's discriminatory, huh? And he said, don't file a report on me. And she said, what do you mean report? And he said, a Me Too report. And she goes, oh, me too. And that really, really hit me. And I don't think that, and those types of things are just in there repeatedly. And this isn't something that was hidden. It was something that they just think is fine. So if that's the person doing this, what is in the material, not even overtly, that can be pulled? These are the people that think it's okay, so who are they hiring? What's subtle in there that our kids, our teachers might not see? So that's my thought, and so I don't know. I'll keep my eye on it, but
I think we have to continue to keep an eye on it. Absolutely.
and along those lines, I hope that parents watching will be aware too, because I don't know that people are. So,
Does anybody else have anything to offer for this conversation or questions for Jana? Okay. Oh, one more?
I'm sorry.
Quickly.
I do want to say I
Yes.
appreciate everything, and it's no like nothing down on you, on the teachers, anything, because I know, I mean, I had to research for days and talk to my friend in Hawaii and everything, and I know that this is otherwise the best that we have. I know that it fits with what we need and everything, so this is no way in any disrespect or anything. So I want to make that clear too.
Thank you.
And Susan.
And I appreciate your comments, and they're valid, Carrie, that we need to be looking at that and informing if others have not looked at it. But I also trust and hope that our teachers are checking for anything that might be discriminatory prior to that getting to the students. So I'm hoping we trust our administrators and our teachers to filter anything like that, document, make sure it gets reported, have that conversation, and ensure that we keep all our kiddos safe from things that are very slighted, I guess.
Thanks for a good conversation, guys, because if we don't talk about it, I mean, talking about it is how we stay on alert and we can continue to be proactive. So thank you for the contributions to that discussion. And I didn't think any of it came across as disrespectful. This board, again, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, people bring stuff forward, but we all listen to each other and take that in. It's not personal. We're just all trying to do what's best for our kids and for our staff. So we don't have to apologize for that. Okay, moving on. Old business. We added in. We're just going to touch base on this for a moment. Support for displaced students. We don't have a lot to add based on, we had this on our special meeting agenda. Just want to make sure we're keeping the latest up-to-date information in front of the board, and Mr. Dorothy will talk about what some of our options are with that, but not a ton on that. Just want to make sure we're keeping that in front of you guys. Mr. Dorothy?
Most certainly we started that discussion on if we had to go to all virtual, what would we do with some of our students that may be displaced from their education. I have talked with the county about, yes, we understand when we go to Orange that school we would go to all virtual, but we do have permission to take some of our students with lots of disabilities and have the ability to bring them in a special, as long as we follow strict social distancing, still following all those issues. to be able to bring them into the building for a program if we need to. Most certainly, we have some other spaces in town that we could get students together for those that maybe can't get internet any way we try and do it. So most certainly, we've had a couple churches in town. As I said before, Lumberyard Arts Center has volunteered from the very beginning to allow space for students to come in and meet during that time if they need to and get access to the internet. So I think there are opportunities there for our students that maybe can't get internet at all. Most certainly during last spring, Mr. Peterson helped go through a process. We helped get a lot of people with internet, but we also found out that there were some that were in a situation where there isn't a good way to get internet to those families because of their location. There were things we could try, hotspots and so on, and most certainly we're prepared to do that if we have to go to that again. But we also know that there were some that reached a point where it was just, there wasn't any way to get internet to them, at least at this time. But that is something that we'll work on at that time. So if internet can't go to them, then we find a way to get them to internet if we need to when that time comes. My hope is we do not have to go to virtual at all. Most certainly that's what everybody would like, but I do think that we have to be prepared, so we need to be ready with options for students because we'll have a weekend to implement. We'll be informed on a Thursday, and then most certainly by Monday, we're in it for at least a week, and then we see how that goes. I hope that's not where we'll go, but again, realistically, we won't be able to tell whether we'll go to Orange someday or not. So.
Have there been any discussions about additional considerations for kids who are really young, like the early childhood programs, the kindergarten kids who just logistically cannot be left at home by themselves in those circumstances if we are shut down for a week or two?
There is a part of the Unified Command is a subcommittee that is working on the daycare issue to work with those kids that working parents cannot be there at home. They have not come out with a specific plan, but I know that they've been working on that for a while. I know the people that are on there, they called me in one time to answer questions for Baldwin in particular about what our challenges might be here. So I know they're working on a plan. They understand it's a problem. They already have that problem in Lawrence right now because they're all virtual to start with. And so they've had daycare issues in Lawrence now since the beginning of school. So I think it is, they're working on that, but I honestly have not seen the plan of what that looks like. Yep.
One thing that I personally don't like this plan, I'll say it, but one thing that they're doing in Franklin County, the elementary schools have asked Ottawa if they have students who want to volunteer to watch kids at those locations. So that's what they're doing. I don't know that that's that great of an idea, but
well, Carrie, I will tell you, that was one of the questions that was asked of me that day I met with that committee was, would you have older students that might be able to watch, or would you maybe have some staff that won't, like for instance, a bus driver who may not be able to drive a bus during a move to virtual, could they possibly watch kids during that time? So they asked those questions about some of the older kids being able to do that. Of course, the concern there is those older kids are still continuing their education, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't take time to to do that. But that was one of the questions that was asked of me that day.
So I have a question. When we talk about being in orange and it being too dangerous to have kids in school, if the answer to then is to take them out and lump them together in a church, I don't see the benefit to having them just gathering in a big group somewhere when, at least when they're in school, they're cohorted, right? I feel like that's probably, in my mind at least, that's like the safest place for them to be, because they're still in their small groups, they're 10 kids in a class or whatever, and they're staying in their places versus, now we're shutting down school, taking them out of school, but let's put them all in daycare, and so now you've lost any kind of cohorting that you could have had if you kept them in school, and then I think the idea behind orange would be, hey, we're not going to have kids together at all. Kids are going to stay home, and in a perfect world, that's what that would mean. But it's not a perfect world, and so I feel like what we're talking about doing is taking kids out of school and then opening the church, and then now you have 100 kids that are from every different grade level, and they're all together in one place. I can't imagine that they're going to be able to maintain social distancing. I can't imagine that they've got enough staff in that school or in that facility that they're going to be able to make sure kids are wearing their masks and all that kind of stuff. So to me, it almost is counterproductive to take them out of an environment where they're cohorted, pretty well supervised, small groups, good social distancing, they're still getting all their education, to say we're going to just turn them loose and it's up to the parents to figure out where to put them. Now these parents are at work and everybody's just, well, go to the lumber yard, and now you've got 70 or 80 kids in the lumber yard, with no cohorting. To me, it seems like on paper that's a really good idea to say shut down the schools and do stuff, but I think in reality and actuality and implementation of that, it winds up being almost the exact opposite of what you'd want to be doing in that situation.
So to that point, do we know the general scale or number of kids we would be trying to work for solutions around this on? Like, are we talking about 50 kids that you had difficulty with finding internet for last year, or that have significant enough IEPs where they cannot be left alone type of thing? Or is it more like 300 kids we have to?
And is it just loss of lack of internet, or is it lack of, my kid, this kid's in 3rd grade, both parents work, and they can't keep him at home, so now they're going to, I don't see the difference between having kids in, for lack of a better, like in a daycare setting, as opposed to being in a school setting.
Well, and so Phil, you're bringing the reason why they don't have a plan yet, which is it better to have the kids in school during that time, or parents trying to find daycares somewhere when they work and trying to put them there, and you're just pushing the issue from one place to another. That's part of the issue here is you're trying to meet one thing and you're creating another issue. I know that came up in the Unified Commands discussion last week, and the lady that's chairing that committee brought that up. Are we not placing these kids right into a situation that's not as safe as if we were in the school? So I think that's part of their discussion on when is the appropriate time to go to orange. And I think they're still having that discussion, because are these kids safer at the school or safer at home or at a daycare? Because of the points you just made. And Chris, I don't know for sure. I see Bronze sitting back there. Maybe Bronze can remind me. Bronze, do you recall in the end how many we reached the point where we did not think we could get internet to them at all, at least at their home? That would be fine, or would you like Bronze to come up here? So, yes, the people at home, Bronze would probably like to hear the answer. Sorry to make you get up, Bronze.
Well, while he's walking up, then I guess
Sure.
the next question, as a follow-on, you said they're kind of discussing it. My hope would be then that they're not gonna flip to orange and not have given us any guidance.
I believe that they will,
Okay, so give us guidance.
as to how that's going to work. I think they're looking at a lot of things for a switch to orange, and what that's gonna look like. But yes, that is a big thing that they're trying to figure out themselves. I can't tell you if they'll have a great answer, Phil, for that, because you're already figuring out what the complication is with it. So.
Yeah, and the flip side of this is that, you know, if we are at orange levels and we are not closing down schools, we have a large number of parents who are going to say, why are you not closing down schools? And we have compulsory education. We have to keep continuing to send our kids to the building here if we're at, 20% positivity rates and increasing cases or something, right? So this is I see the trap that we're kind of in with this command here and kind of having some complications around making these decisions here, but
It
since
does.
you can.
Bronze, would you want to talk last spring? I know you did so much work on trying to find how many families we could get internet to and how many, even if somebody would pay for it, we got to a point where we had a few families that we couldn't get internet to them. Comment to that, Bronze, if you would, please.
Sure, and I apologize, I didn't realize it was going to be on TV tonight, so. So there were only, I think when we started out, there may have been 50 or so people on that list, maybe a few more. By the time we got to the end, there were probably only about 15 that we really couldn't get some form of internet to. There was a group that we could never get responses from, so we just we left messages, tried to give as much information as we could, but just left it at that. So I'm not sure whether they got internet or whether they did not. But there was, I think, if I remember correctly, about 15. But anecdotally, just so you know, when I was talking to all of those folks, to whoever made the point, it wasn't always just the internet that was their issue. Some of them actually had access, but they really didn't want to get internet for a couple of different reasons. Some people just didn't really think it was good to have their kids on the device all the time, and it was a hard way for them to regulate it. There were others that, just didn't feel that was the right fit for their family. So there were several that were like that, and then the other group were folks that, even with, I would say it probably happened more with the people that had kids that were maybe 5th grade and below, where they were just concerned about, even at that level, am I really the one that can do this and teach this? And if I've got to go to work, how's it going to happen? It was a little better last spring because a lot of people were just flat shut down. Now a lot of people are back at work, so I don't know for sure, but I'm imagining it would be a little bit worse of a problem than it was at least last spring. I think that there was probably at least one parent that was probably shut down in some variety, whereas now I don't know that would be the case, but I can't speak to that for sure, but that's what I would suspect anyway.
Thank you, Bronze. Did anybody have any questions? Bronze did of course, we recognized him for his work last spring in helping us make contacts with families during that time to try and make sure we got internet to as many families as we could during what we were doing in the spring. Did anybody have a question for Bronze on that?
Sure, and yeah, if you have any questions, that'd be fine. I just thought of something else and just want to reiterate. I would say that issue that I was speaking of where people were, and it wasn't always a money thing, because I think a lot of the internet providers have really stepped up and did an amazing job to help people that maybe needed the help. And there were some of the kids that were in the country that would still have had to have paid a little bit higher price because some of the providers that are in town here don't reach out that far. But even once we got all of that around, there's still some folks that were just, again, like I was saying, just hesitant about, how is this going to work, basically, even if I have it, how am I going to do it? So, anyway, okay.
Thank you very much, Bronze.
So as we're kind of talking about this and like what we're going to do in orange, so are we supposed to come to an idea or agreement tonight on Or we're gonna do an orange, or is that just kind of, we're gonna talk
No,
about that?
actually, we haven't got to the gating
Right.
criteria, right? We haven't started that
Okay.
one. So I was just filling the board in on some of those displacement places, if we get to that and need that.
And I just want that to continue to be on the agenda, just because it keeps us thinking that way. Again, what does it mean? If we decide this, what does that mean? Not just in some abstract way, but what does it really mean? There are many people working on that, but we have to keep thinking about those things too. So I'd ask Mr. Dorothy to update the group that the county has said that there's some recognition that for special education folks, there may be ways for them to continue to be allowed in the building. And that was new information from our special meeting, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys were apprised of that. Unless there's any question about support for displaced students as a topic in of itself, then we'll go ahead and move on to the next item under old business, which is the gating criteria. So now we'll do the segue. All right. I'm not, at our last meeting, let's see, our discussion, and I think we really need to just stop calling it gating criteria for extracurricular, because gating criteria, when we talk about any of it, it's just a larger conversation, because every decision about all of it really has to fall under that umbrella philosophy. This is an opportunity to kind of take in what we heard tonight from public comment. As board members know, at the last meeting, you had a sentiment that was, sort of trending in one direction. Let's go back to school 5 days a week and do it all. And then, as we know, and we had a chance to hear from tonight, there certainly is that other. I hate to characterize it as sides, because this is just more complex than that. But there are other positions in terms of how folks are feeling about what is the appropriate thing to do. So to recap where we are at, for those who are confused about, and understandably so, at our last meeting, we affirmed, in our first motion, we affirmed our support for staying with the plans that are in place for education. And I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with that. Because there has been so much confusion. That means what we're doing right now with the AB schedule and how we have our elementary, junior high, and high school, those plans have been affirmed through the rest of this semester. That we will discuss what that looks like moving forward, but for those who are worried, are we going back to 5 days of school tomorrow? My understanding, unless the board has a different conversation, and I'm only here to summarize, other than take my own individual vote later, I want to make sure that everyone is clear that is what we did in our motion at our last special meeting. And everybody's still okay. So, sorry, can you speak in the? Okay, cool, good. All right, progress. And then the second piece of that was, how do we handle the voluntary aspects of what people are doing right now? And we, as a board, in the both sides and the way we've attempted to sort of compromise and find our way through, as a board, we have sort of delineated between our legal obligation to provide required public education by law, and we've delineated that between the involuntary aspects of all activities. And again, that does not just include athletics, that includes the fall musical, that includes things going on at the junior high that are elective, etc. All of that falls under that umbrella. So I want to make sure that we don't get trapped in just thinking, although it is more relevant to secondary, we have to remember that all the decisions we make, I say this for myself because I made that mistake at the last meeting, it's pre-K through 12 on all of this. So as that affects for the gating criteria for extracurricular activities, there was some question about how we stated that motion in terms of what the conversation was and how that related to spectators. The motion was, the motion was to allow for spectators. That was the discussion, because previously we had not allowed for spectators in yellow, and so that was part of it. And the motion that ended up being stated, and Megan, you can correct me if I have it wrong, but the motion by Phil, and then it was seconded by Chris, I think, yes, that we were allowing, and the word spectators was used, spectators in limited quantities with no more than 4, and based on the limitations that a particular venue may have, that would extend for green, yellow, and orange. That was the motion. And then our vote was, based on our discussion about that, our vote was 5-1. Megan, with your looking at is that a correct recap of what we did based on, okay. So that's where we are. And I think that, you know, in some respects, there's still big confusion about that because, again, coming full circle to what we were just talking about with displaced students, what does that mean for Orange? So, in terms of what we did in that motion. Clearly, you wouldn't assume spectators at an event, you know, that there is no event. But we did say Orange, so I want to make sure that the board is on the same page with whatever we decide as a group. But I did want to provide that recap of that's where we were, this is where we are. The more clear we can be on all of this, just because by nature it's confusing, the better. Mr. Dorothy, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
The only thing on that, and that's fine, I was very glad the board made their decisions that they made. The only thing that might not be completely clear, I think we get it. We get what the board's intention was. But the one thing that wasn't stated there is it said spectators allowed in green, yellow, orange, but a motion was not in there about will we continue extracurriculars into orange also. I believe, if I understood the board right, that was the intent, that we would continue extracurriculars into orange. I think it would be good if you could clear that up with an exact motion on that or discussion on that tonight. But I would take it as, and what the administrators and I have taken that as, is that would continue into orange. So that's the only thing that we have in here at all. So that's the rest of it. We're set. We're ready to go. We're following the gating criteria for school and extracurriculars, green, yellow, and orange right now. That's the way we're taking it.
That's not the way I interpreted our meeting. Here's what I interpreted. I think it was pretty clear that we did not decide activities in orange the other night. We talked about it specifically and said we weren't quite ready to make a vote there. What we did vote on was allowing spectators if we should have events in all those different categories. I don't think we've settled on whether we're having events in orange or not. That was my understanding that we'd do that tonight.
Yeah, and I'm with Andy's interpretation there too. And reading back what motions we did pass, I could see there being a gigantic amount of confusion here because I think the previous motion to that mentions the intent to stick with that green and yellow instructional delivery plan that we had previously authorized back in maybe August, I guess. In conjunction, in my understanding anyway, is in conjunction with that, the extracurricular activities that go along with that yellow category. So I think it is helpful to kind of clarify that because we do seem to have some floating extracurriculars and we don't actually have school up to this point based on what I'm currently reading these motions.
Yeah, I'll say certainly my intent was to say we would do extracurricular activities through Orange with spectators. So I'd be happy to remake that motion, but my kind of argument for that would be, you know, Andy, you mentioned that puts other students at risk, and then we kind of talked about the idea that if we're in orange and we're not in school, that's not really, it's not, you know, you're not having kids bring that extra risk to school, and since it's a voluntary thing, so yeah, it's poor wordsmithing on my part to make that motion, so I apologize for the confusion, but certainly my intention was to be able to say we would take sports with limited, with the appropriate limiting mitigation factors in place working with spectators in green, yellow, and orange. So I apologize for the confusion because that's on me.
Well, I restated the motion back, and if I had been doing my job, I always restate the motion so that it is clear, so that if we have any kind of pitfalls, there's an opportunity to correct that before we vote on it. My understanding I'll talk about that later. Carrie, what was your understanding? Because I want to hear from Carrie and Tony. We have Andy and Chris who basically are saying that's not what I meant to vote for. I've heard from Phil, and I'd like to hear from Carrie and Tony about what your impression was, what you're voting on, before we continue our discussion.
I thought that the motion that to allow sports through orange was the one that Phil made that we all said no, and then he pulled.
That's for school. That was just, and I didn't make the motion. That was the one that we talked about for school.
Right. Okay. So, okay, and then I don't know what happened. But right now,
11:30 at night.
Right, yeah. Right now, if I were to vote, if we could play sports through orange, I would say no. Just to start over, mulligan. That's what I would do. So, because I currently I just had to quarantine a whole football team, so that's what I would do.
I know you want to go to Tony, and I won't talk long. Phil, I don't think it's on you. I think we just didn't understand what you were. And that's on us not clarifying. My interpretation of your motion was, let's not go back and have to revisit the spectator thing. It kind of covers all the possibilities. So, and then we decide down the line.
And here we are down the line.
And I do recall that we had a discussion earlier in the evening about sports activities specifically, and if other communities were willing to play us in orange, that we would go ahead and do that. So that sort of made me feel like we were going to try to do extracurricular activities in orange with spectators, and I didn't like the orange part of the motion anyway, but I thought it was a vote just on spectators. But implicit in that was the extracurricular stuff, and so I didn't separate it in my mind, although I understand how it could be interpreted that way.
So then, do we need a new motion to say that?
Yeah. Susan, do you have anything that you would like to ask about, and it's okay if you don't, but I don't want to skip over you as part of this. I don't want to put you on the spot either, but I want to make sure you have opportunity.
I'm just kind of glad I was otherwise unavailable for the meeting. But just to be clear, orange is no school, all remote learning.
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, so if I were to vote, that I would be absolutely clear on that.
Other questions?
So with the orange, we keep talking about it in terms of the numbers, but we still go by we still look at absenteeism too once we get enough data there, right? Are we at that point yet?
Not yet. Most certainly those numbers our principals have to report that weekly on Fridays. What the weekly report is of the number of students absent and the number of students that are absent for some sort of COVID reason. It doesn't mean it's a positive test. It could be quarantine because dad had it, or they could be gone. So it's related to COVID. That's how we're supposed to report it to KDHE. They then report that to our county, who then tracks that absenteeism for Baldwin, and then would, if they feel it's reached a certain level, which is if I remember on the gating criteria, I think it's in green, it's less than 3% above what the normal absenteeism, then it goes to 6%, and then 9%, I believe, going, but that's percentage above what our normal everyday attendance is. So it would take quite a few kids to make those jumps before you'd be. And again, they always say absenteeism is one of the criteria that you consider for students, staff, that percentage positive, and new cases, if I recall all of those.
Paul, are the remote students counted into that
No.
absenteeism
No.
figure as well?
We do not count remote students in that. They want to know the kids that are coming on site.
Okay, so essentially we're playing with 31% actually, to be exact. Playing with 31% fewer students in that absenteeism calculation.
Well, your percentage of who's there compared to how many.
Previous years, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just, I'm doing math in my head, figuring this.
That doesn't
That's a good thing
answer
or a bad
that.
thing?
You couldn't base it on previous year and have it be accurate, is what you're saying.
It's not apples to apples, I suppose, but I'm just trying to think about it makes things more complicated, given that we have fewer students in that calculation for this year.
I think
They
that
count for
we're
bigger
going by
percentage.
the number of kids that we have absent in a week compared to the number of kids, in addition to that, of our number of kids overall. So I know initially they said comparison to that, but it's all this year data. They at one time said it would go back to what your norm was, but I think they're basing it now just on what we have this year.
Oh, so that's, that's what I remember too, so that's changed then.
I believe they decided that the best way to do it was look at the total number, how much are we affecting this year's attendance, but they compare it to, every single day, forget COVID, every single day we have so many kids absent every day. That's our norm.
Right.
So they compare it to that, and are we going more than 3% above that normal in COVID, then it starts coming into play.
So it's only the COVID absences that they're looking at.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so if some kid has a doctor's appointment, is absent that day, they're not counting that as an absence towards.
It counts as an absence.
But not towards the gating criteria.
No, not towards the gating criteria. So any kid that's gone for whatever reason, not related to COVID, is not counting against that gating criteria.
Not to further muddy the waters on this mathematical equation here, but I'm looking at the Douglas County Public Health site right now for that gating criteria, and it does say absenteeism is percentage increase compared to 2019, 2020. So
that's what I understood. The first time I heard it was different, but I'm looking at the same.
Yeah, and they've been changing things, kind of as we go here too. But that's at least on this version I'm looking at here from their website. Can't see publication date on August 17th. So unless it's changed more recently than that, which it may have, that's the publisher.
All I know is that in the criteria, maybe I'm wrong, guys, but I don't think that's what we're reporting on Fridays to them.
Okay.
I think all they're asking for, and so before I go any further, I'm going to ask one of the principals to please help me here and correct me, right or wrong. On Fridays, what are they asking you to report?
While Derek's coming up, I will say that this is a number that's always concerned me a lot. I'm happy to hear that they're pulling out COVID-specific reasons for absenteeism, because I'm just super concerned that parents are going to be awfully cautious this year about sending their kid to school if they've got sniffles or a slight fever, and the concern to kind of public health-wise keep those kids at home. So if there's a way that we're disaggregating that already, that's fantastic, or at least the county is. But So very concerned about that number just incidentally creeping up as we get into cold and flu season, for instance.
So Derek, what exactly are those questions? And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but let's make sure we're right.
All right,
So
I'm going to skip the basics like your building and the date and things of that nature. But they want to know learning environment for the week. They give you the option of on-site, hybrid, remote, or school not in session. Mask usage for reporting this week, all that apply. Choices are NA, remote learning environment only. Masks are required for all teachers, staff, and visitors. Masks are encouraged but not required for all teachers, staff, and visitors. Masks are required for all students. Masks are required for most but not all students. Masks are encouraged but not required for students. Explanation, and then a text box, explanation of mask usage optional. And then it says number of individual full-time, part-time staff absent this week. And it gives a long explanation. If staff are attending in virtual or remote learning environment, they should not be counted as absent. Each school can define staff absenteeism according to their normal practice. But please use the same definition when responding to the survey during the 2022-21 school year. If there is no standard definition, then consider staff that were not available to perform the duties. Total number, next one, total number of full and part-time staff working at the school. Next one, number of individual students absent this week. And then it gets the same disclosure. I picked one thing I read a second ago again. Next box is total number of students enrolled at school, number of known new cases of COVID-19 among staff this week. And lastly, number of known new cases of COVID-19 among students this week. That's it. Anything else?
no, that's it. Thank you, Derek. So those are the questions they're asking us to report. So those are the numbers they're using. I don't know how they're comparing back to data from before when they're getting data that's telling them what's going on right now. I know they said that to begin with, that they would try to compare to a number before, but that's what they're asking.
Well, I mean, to Kelly, to your point, we did hear a couple of emails of people, from people, public comments, that were kind of against us opening things up. I mean, that was 2 out of, I mean, how many comments did we have? We had a lot of people in person. So to me, the overwhelming, at least from the Patriots, the overwhelming desire would to be more liberal with what we're doing as to be more conservative than what we're doing. I mean, certainly, no matter what we do, I think that we'll have people that are unhappy both ways.
We can count on that.
Yeah. So and I really like how you said that you've got the imperative legal requirement for students to be educated, and so parents can't just on a whim say, well, I'm not sending my kids to school anymore, right? There's legal ramifications for that. Where in athletics as opposed to academics, it is purely a voluntary thing, whether you're spectating or playing. So to me, I think that my preference, and it's probably pretty obvious, would be, based on my motion the other night about spectators and what the guidance that we gave Gary about playing, because we talked about even playing when we're in orange, and if we're in orange and the other team is in orange but nobody has any cases, that we would go ahead and play them. Certainly my intention was to be to have athletics in the orange classification and have spectators through orange. So, and I feel like we as a school board, it's hard to not get wrapped up in the idea of what our job is. Our job certainly entails keeping kids safe and doing that kind of stuff. But I think first and foremost, what we should be doing is facilitating these educational years for these kids. And athletics, and I don't mean to just say athletics, but the extracurricular activities are a huge part of that. And I hate to see kids, whether and I'm sorry for saying athletics all the time, because it's not just athletics, like you pointed out. I mean, it's band, and it's choir, and it's debate. You know, all of those things that kids can voluntarily do, and people that don't want to do them don't have to do them. You know, if the fear of COVID is enough to make them not want to, there's nothing that's, you know, making people do stuff. And those that aren't fearful of that or value that over their fear, I don't think we should not punish them, but I don't think we should take that potential component away from them if we have the opportunity to let them do it.
Other discussion? I will admit that my understanding of the discussion, based on the whole litany of questions that Gary sent us, that we went through bit by bit, and where that all went, I truly did think that this board voted to authorize, because how is there a spectator if there's not an event? I really thought that was the vote that we took. I'm glad we're having this discussion, because if people had different impressions of what that motion meant, I think, and I don't want to mischaracterize, so administrators, if I'm saying something wrong, feel free to correct the record. I think our administrators had that understanding when that vote was taken 5-1, that that's what it meant. So that's okay. It's good for us to come back to it and make sure that everyone is clear about what it is we will and will not allow. My position on this is that, again, I've just gone fully cynical. I continue to be concerned not only about the things that we are learning about COVID, that continues to be offset by the things I know that will happen when some of these learning experiences are taken away. I'm concerned about drug use. I'm concerned about unprotected sex. I'm concerned about parties in fields and car accidents after graduation parties. Those are the things that I know. But none of that is, you know, in a denying of the realities of this virus. I struggle with moving metrics from the county. I really liked the patron last week that sent in the Mill Valley, the one the Mill Valley was using. I felt like brought in a lot of different metrics aside from the positive test rate. I appreciate the hard work of United Command. I think they're fabulous people. I think they're doing a wonderful job. But at this meeting last week, Dan even said that they were going to be re-looking at how they create the very gating criteria that we're making decisions on. So in my mind, the discussion went to, again, here's where we can compromise between things that are voluntary or involuntary. But also, no matter what I thought about it, my most important task is to make sure that the board puts forward a motion that is clear and that people don't go away. So epic failure, party of one. So let's fix it. Let's fix it however we need to. So that our administrators and Mr. Dorothy, hey, Mr. Dorothy, do you have anything to say? I need a motion. So we find ourselves still in this place that we need clarification, and we had board members that had a different impression of what occurred. And to be honest, that was my impression, that is in fact what we were allowing. Clearly knowing that if there is a case on the team does what they have to do with that in terms of quarantining. Anyway, with the bar moving at the county, they told themselves that they are doing that, and that happens with science. You find out more, you adjust things. That's not anti-science. That's we learn more about it, and we further refine the metrics by which we make decisions. So we find ourselves in the same place, I think, as far as clarifying the motion of what we are going to allow and not allow.
I know I wasn't here last time, and so I'm sorry, I don't want to step backwards, but I do want to state my piece. And I can't imagine having extracurricular events and not having school. So my piece is, if we're having extracurricular events, we should be having school, especially if we are not having, if we don't have any cases. I also think that what we've decided on, we can't be blurry about. If we decided on something until semester, we should stick to it. When you spoke to the part about adjusting because we have research coming, I think that's valid and true. But if I don't want to adjust for extracurricular activities if we're not going to adjust for kids being at school. To me, it just doesn't make sense in my head to have extracurricular but not be in school.
I agree, so let's make school, let's adjust school.
So I'll take the blame for last week, Kelly. You and Phil don't have to. Because I was the one who tried to say, I'm not ready to decide on this because I haven't thought it through enough, and I want to do that Monday, and I thought you agreed with me, so I didn't make that clear enough. So I'm happy I have thought about it a lot. I don't support activities in Orange, and I understand what you're saying, Phil, and what I keep thinking about is that we keep seeing the spread occur on campuses and amongst teams locally and across the country because they keep having practices and team dinners and these other things that happen. And our goal, if we have to go to Orange and we're not in the buildings, which we all agree is very suboptimal, is to get cases low enough and minimize risk enough that we can get back in the building as soon as possible. And I just think having those players, and I admit most of the risk in my mind is associated with those contact sports, congregate in that way impedes that mission. So that's where so I'm happy saying that what we decided the other night was that we're doing sports in Orange. I'm happy to make a motion otherwise, and if it flies, great. If it doesn't, so be it. But that's where I stand.
I fully admit I don't remember much, but I'm just going to be honest. But what Tony says makes sense, that we were planning for if we played another team like that. And I do remember what Andy says, and I would go along those lines as far as if I had to say what I remembered it as. And then going towards sports and teams, our athletic team at Ottawa, we had football players who some were asymptomatic. One had symptoms and still played because it was that important. And we have a slew of players now, and we had to quarantine the whole team. And we ended up now with 30% of our student body is quarantined. And to Phil's point of our job as a board to take care of our students, part of taking care of them is getting them to stay in school. Clearly, that's what we've all talked about. The student who wrote, or the mom who wrote in about her student, she wants to be hybrid because she feels safe. She wants to stay in school. And that's part of what we need to do. And I think that part of that would be staying out when it's the most dangerous. We've already gone against the yellow, the more dangerous sports being in yellow. And I think that we do need to stick with what we said. So
I think to your point, I agree. I think the counter argument to that would be is if we're in Orange, there isn't anybody in school. So that we're not there. By playing in Orange, you're not increasing the risk or increasing the potential to be out of school because you're already out of school if you're in Orange. So to me, it's and I struggle because things should be, everything should be very logical. I'm very logical minded, right? And so we're talking, to go harken back to our discussion a little bit earlier, we're talking about displaced students and having people out of school, but still putting them in big groups together outside of school. So I think Susan's right on that if you're, I think if you can play sports, you should be able to go to school. I think the safest place, the most coordinated place, the best place for anybody to be in any of this situation is in school. I personally think we should be in school in Orange. I think we should be playing sports in Orange.
So,
No, go ahead.
so do we have to vote on this tonight?
We kind of already voted on last. I can tell you, so, I think that there will be a pretty significant, shock from, I think, a large group of people that were here that left, with the understanding that we said we were gonna play sports through Orange with, spectators. So, I mean, and again, you guys can take blame all you want, but I'm the one that made the motion. And to me, it was implicitly implied to say if we're having spectators in Orange, and through the whole discussion that we were having, that would mean that we were having sports in Orange. It sounds like we'll do another motion on it. But I understand the idea of that we're in Orange, there's higher risk, all that kind of stuff, but it's kind of moot because we're not in school. So those kids that are out there playing in Orange, they're not coming back into the classroom. The people that are doing hybrid and they're worried that they're going to get something over in Orange don't have to worry about it because we're not in school. So I don't see a good reason to tell them that we can't. And I think that it's a little bit, I think, an outdated rule about no school, no sports. Because I think there are a lot of instances, even for snow days, that kind of thing, that at the discretion of the administration, we can say, well, it's even though we're having a snow day, it's a state tournament for basketball, we can still play. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is some leeway in the sense that if you're not in school, that's not an automatic no sports, no band, no choir, no nothing kind of thing. It's kind of at the discretion.
It's at the discretion, but it's also a priority. And our priority should be the education of our kids, the academic knowledge. And so if we're going to, to me, it feels like a skewed priority to say, go ahead and play sports, but don't be in school.
To me, that's because that's the one thing I feel like I might be able to get. If I remote, we're two to however many to have school in March. I mean, to me, that's the safest place anybody can be in this situation is in school.
I do lament that, I see, Bronze is waving, but I don't know if we can do that because we don't have public comment. But the board has been forwarded Mr. Peterson's email correspondence, and we're grateful for that ongoing input. I will say, I really wish that the county would either say, you're in school or we're shutting you down. I really think the colors make it super confusing because also the metrics that are associated with the colors and the way it keeps changing. And to be honest, last week, and I want to be very careful because I swear to you, I know people are working very hard to make this data driven, and I in no way is it my intention to undermine any of that. But what I'm saying is, from a decision-making standpoint, when I see the metrics, even for the colors changing, when I hear the director saying, yeah, we're probably going to take a different look at that, because people are starting to push back on what is the difference between orange and yellow if you're only looking at this. I mean, there's so many things to be looking at. And they're taking in that feedback, and we appreciate that. And Mr. Partridge was a champ to sit there for what felt like 3 hours and take the questions. So I mean absolutely no disrespect, but I do think, just for the sake of we've got to get this, I don't want to stifle anything if discussion wants to continue, but I knew what I was voting for because I think the alternative is worse. And that comes from a very pragmatic place. If we do not have our kids supervised in the ways we have mitigated with the extra spacing and 30% of our population off-site and no waffling at all about masks, I worry about, unless the county says, hey, it's too unsafe, shut down. Cool, that's a clear line. It's too dangerous. The colors in between, I admit, confuse me because I really worry that we're going to cause more problems than we solve with the other. That's just my position. We will need a motion, and I think there might be a little bit more discussion.
Just a clarifying question here too. Does this board have the authority to make our own gating rubric? Like, can we use the county's data that they're kind of operating off of, localize that to some extent, in a similar fashion to the DeSoto example that was shared with us?
So what you have is everything that the gating criteria are guidelines, recommendations to you. There's no orders there. So most certainly the board can do that. I think, and I get where you're going, Chris, but I think we've got both sides of that. There are those that say, throw it out, we want to do our own thing and go. And then we've also got a contingent that you heard from tonight that say, hey, I want you to follow that data. So to answer your question, do you have to follow those? No, there's no legal order that says you have to do that. They are guidelines, recommendations at this point. I do want to point this out, and I probably should have said it the other night. Most certainly, I want the board to know, and many of the public to know, the county has full legal authority to shut us down. If they feel like it reaches a point where they think it's not safe anymore, they can order us closed. In fact, back when this started, the first order we got was from the county, not the governor. The county shut us down for that first week or 2 weeks. They shut us down and said, you will close. And so they shut everything down along with many other things. And so at any point, and they have had some discussion about saying, when it reaches this point, it's not going to be guidelines anymore. It'll be an order that you close. Then most certainly, we don't have any choice except to figure out that other option and how that might work. What will they allow us to continue? What will they not allow us to continue? So that's a long answer to one question.
And to clarify too, I think we've been operating off of this county guideline for, throughout the summer up to now, and I would certainly advocate that we continue to do so for the remainder of this semester. I think one thing that I keep coming back to is we're all recognizing this is a flawed set of data to operate off of, and would we have the leniency, the authority to say in November or whenever, October or something, come up with a new rubric for us to operate under and say, going forward from this point on, starting in January, for instance, we're going to operate under, the Baldwin City School District gating rubric. And it sounds like we could, because it's guidance until they shut the whole thing down.
Chris, I think that's really fair because though the position I have is I'm worried about people going other places and just spread. It's kind of like going against the logic. It's okay for me to go to Wamego, but it's not okay for me to go to a home meet. It's not because I'm in denial of how serious this is. It's because it doesn't make sense for people to be huddled without masks 1 inch off of school property. And I want you guys to know that my support for Orange is based on the same reason. I want to incentivize the behaviors that promote public health, although I recognize that 5 of you are in a different spot, and I completely respect that. This is what we told parents we were basing it off of, coming back to that fairness piece. And I don't think it is fair, regardless of my personal position about it, I don't think it's fair to ask people to change the rules in the middle of the game. So I personally would be fully willing to be like, let's stick with it and put a clarifying motion about what we already said about green and yellow, and it's all up for looking at it again for next semester. I would, if that helps move this along, and I don't want to stop discussion if more discussion needs to be had, but I also reread my presidential handbook, and it said the president's job is to make sure the meeting gets adjourned in timely fashions, and I'm trying to do better about that. So if that helps move this in a place where everyone could be comfortable, I do think that's a very fair. And Tony actually brought up that point at our last meeting in terms of changing. I'm giving you credit. It was a good point.
I know what point I brought up.
Yes, just say yes. It was a good point because it's, hey, this is flawed or not. This is the metric that families made their decisions off of. And for better or for worse, that's what we have. And we have another opportunity coming up that we can say, how can we take a look at this that maybe makes more sense, but to do it 2 weeks into school, 3 weeks, whatever. So
Well,
what do you guys think?
Yeah, and it was a semester decision. Right. That's the thing I was looking at. And Phil, I want to comment on your logic about having athletics or other extracurricular activities poses no threat to the students that aren't involved in that because we aren't having school, right? That's great logic if this population of students who are involved in extracurricular activities is a discrete population. This is a public health crisis, and I think we need to take it seriously, despite arguments against the idea that the pandemic is still going. It is still going, and I think that we need to be serious about staying vigilant and controlling it. I get that the last meeting I heard a lot of comments of let's just get back to normal. We want normalcy. And I do too, and I think everybody on the stage does. The way we get back to normal pre-pandemic behavior is to get this virus under control. And despite the wishes of parents and of kids to get out and play sports, to be involved in theater, to be involved in choir, I'm gonna stick to the decisions that we made to try to stop this virus from spreading in my hometown and among this school district. And so that's why I'm sort of digging in my heels on this.
I agree 100%, but then I think that with that same logic, then we should apply to everything. So I don't think we should, how can you have that same logic and then apply it to having displaced students all gathering in Orange at the lumberyard?
And I think that's a legitimate point, and one that I had not thought about before you brought it up. And so, but that to me is a different matter than do we have cross-country events when we're in Orange, right? As safe as I think cross-country probably is. Right. And so, so I guess I want to stick with the advice that we got from the professionals, the people that know more about virology than I do. And I get the psychology of it. We're all tired. We're all ready to get rid of these masks. We're all ready to get out and do things that we did back in February, right? Which seems like a million years ago.
The old world.
Yeah. But I think the sooner we can get through this, the more normal things are going to be, and the way that we do that is we bring these numbers down, right? Because I'm looking at reports from all 50 states just for today, and this thing doesn't seem to be going away.
Yeah, I agree, because there's only two ways that you can look at it, right? There it is. It's either we have to do everything or go back to doing nothing, because you can't do it halfway. And there's certainly different camps that think different things about it. But if we're going to say we need to go all the way, then we need to go all the way. And I think that if the school shuts us down, I don't think we should have any. You shouldn't be able to gather. You shouldn't be able to do those things. And I would have trouble looking at a senior kid who's playing his last year of football and him saying, well, we're not in school, but I just spent all day long at the lumberyards yard, with 80 other kids in a little room, but I can't go play football, And so to me, it's illogical to say that both can be true. And so that's my struggle. So if we say that, hey, we shouldn't do anything, nobody should gather, nobody should do anything for athletics, nobody should do anything for band, then nobody should do anything for school either. And so that would, because if it's that big of if it's that serious, I'm not saying that it's not, but if it's that serious, then people should be staying home from work to take care of their kids. The grocery store should be shut down. I just have a hard time understanding why, I can go into a building like Walmart and have 300 other people in there in a closed-in space, touching all the food that I'm about to touch, do all that kind of stuff, nobody's wiping that down, but yet I can't have, that Johnny can't play the trombone at his concert because we're in Orange, and all this other stuff's going on. So I can't reconcile the two together, again, I'd go back and say, I think that we should be in school in Orange, because that's the safest place that anybody could be, because they're cohorted, you know, you've got this little group. But if you do have a case, you can separate that group out, everybody else can continue to do their stuff, and so, I mean, to reconcile those two things is really difficult in my mind.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on what you're saying too, Phil, like, I'm not convinced that we shouldn't be in school in Orange either. And I think the big issue we're having today is that we've got an incongruence in what we're advising we're going to be doing. You know, we've drawn a pretty firm line that there's no in-person school past yellow, and now we're saying athletics is okay in Orange. And I think as an elementary parent, if my kids are having to be at home, but I drive by the high school football field and they're practicing, or they're practicing cheerleading or something, that's a pretty aggravating look from my perspective that way too. So I'm with you. I want to have a full discussion about drawing that in school line all the way up to Orange for our future decision making. And I could be very wrong about that. I want to make that clear too. But I just don't like that incongruence of we do halfway.
I'm with you, man.
You know?
I'm with you. And you know, I don't think it's fair for the county or even for parents to say, oh, you guys can't change, you said this at the beginning. My memory is not the best, it's pretty good, but my memory serves me correctly, we decided people had to pick remote versus hybrid before we even said that this is what we're going to be doing.
That's true.
Yeah, so see, all of this about, oh, well, I would have picked something different if I had known is out the window, because that's very disingenuous, because people picked before we said this is what we're going to do.
But we did say earlier in the summer, to be fair to that side, we did say, hey, this is what we've got, we're going with the county. We did have conversation about that. We didn't have specific conversation about how that related to enrollment options. Right. That's true, but we did say several times throughout the summer, we want to listen to them, because raise your hand if you're a virologist. No, right. So, I mean, that we had laid that groundwork conversation.
I really dislike being mired in a decision we made with what we knew, 3 months ago or 2 months ago. I would much rather be more agile and able to modify what we're doing. I mean, I think the worst thing you can do when you're on a bad course is just continue on the bad course, because that's what you're on. I forget what that's called, but that's like decision bias. Or maybe somebody that's smarter than me knows, but there's actually a term that says that when you're is it confirmation bias? Confirmation bias, right? You're on a bad track, and you keep telling yourself you're on a bad track, and you just stay on that bad track because it's easier to stay on a bad track than to actually say, hey, I made a mistake and let's go this way. So I mean, it really kind of pricks me to think that, oh, we have to stay what we're doing just because that's what we said we were going to do. When I feel like what we should be doing is whatever the very best thing we can do for the kids is with what we have right now, based on what it was forever ago. And if the county is going to be changing their gating criteria, I feel like we should be able to change our gating criteria. And I know there's nothing. Anybody else has been maybe not a big fan of 2020? I'm not. So I feel like that's one more. That's kind of like par for the course for the year, right? I hate feeling like I'm stuck doing something just because that's what we said we were going to do. And I know that there's, everything you do in life has unintended consequences, and it sucks all the way around.
I feel like that's why we're gonna reevaluate for next semester though. Sure. And this semester gives us a chance, because everything does change daily. And this gives us kind of a chance to see what's going on this semester, what works, what doesn't, where the numbers are, and to see what kind of gating criteria we want to use, what works, what might be better. And that gives us some time to work out those kinks. So not that we're saying, oh, well, we'll just stick with this, but figure out what course.
It's half, that's 25% of the seniors last year in school will be gone. Half of their year is gone before we make a decision. I wish, I don't know if we can, I'm not saying we have to be or anything, but I wish that we could have a way to be more agile in how we deal with stuff. It's not, if I go back in time, I would say, look, go to school through Orange. If it gets bad enough, we'll shut down. But let's do hybrid, let's do remote, and let's do all the way through Orange. We'll play through Orange, we'll have sports through Orange. I mean, if I knew now, or knew then what I know now, which I've said a lot of times in my life, that's what I would have said. I hate being, for lack of a better word, mired in the idea that we can't change stuff.
I also wish we wouldn't have committed, same thing, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have committed to a semester, I would have committed to a 9 weeks. The way Lawrence did. They decided to go all virtual, reevaluate. They didn't commit to that for the entire semester. They said, maybe they even said 6 weeks. I'm not sure. But it was a shorter time frame. But I also feel an obligation to, I feel very conflicted on this, guys, because, we tell our kids constantly in this climate, pivot, adapt. If something's not working, embrace what needs to be changed. And so I'm sitting up here feeling like, all right, now we're saying we're going to be in cement blocks for the rest of the semester. On the other side, I see it from the other side too, where families are like, we have taken this very seriously and based our decision making on this. It's not fair to go back and change the rules in the middle of the game. But that's what's happening to all of us. We're in a pandemic. Pandemic is all about rule changing all the time. I don't say that to undermine our decision. I only say that to categorize how difficult this is. I'm willing to compromise reevaluating at semester. I want to change it now personally, and I worry about what I don't know versus what I do know, and I am speaking from a secondary level right now. I don't know everything that's going to happen with COVID. I do know what happens when kids are at home and unsupervised. I want our kids in supervised settings as much as possible because I think we keep them healthier, and I think that actually promotes the public good. I may be wrong about that. It is a pragmatic, more cynical position. I fully admit that versus an idealistic one. But I'm also willing to compromise and reevaluating that semester if that's the direction the board wants to go.
For what it's worth, I don't think we precisely said we're going to adhere to a very rigid set of statistics. What we said was this is overwhelming and we have experts, highly qualified experts at the county level, and we're going to trust them this semester. And they are evolving. They are not staying on this same course. And I'm grateful that they're evolving and able to shift their data a little bit and adjust. And I think it's reasonable that we said these are the people we're going to trust throughout this semester. Phil, your other point, I don't think anybody said we're shoving 80 kids into the lumber yard, and we can't allow that. So what I heard was a few kids with internet issues and maybe a few kids with disabilities. If we start getting into daycare, and then we need to draw a line and say we can't, if we're in this situation, again, where the top priority is getting kids back into the classroom, we have to be very careful about what we're doing to make that happen. And being very careful means minimizing exposures and cases, doing everything we can to get numbers down so we can get back.
As well, I think that Paul was just bringing ideas that were being put on the table. Nobody's voting on that. That was just an idea that was being put on the table for us to consider, but not vote on. But that's just kind of what they're talking about. And none of us think that would be smart to, I believe none of us did.
I don't think that's something we get to vote on, though, is it? I mean, if we shut down school, where kids go is where they go. I mean, I don't think we get to vote on do they get to go to the lumber yard or to the church. I just know that there are several places, and good on them for volunteering their space to let kids come. But and I think that the special education or the special needs stuff, I think that was in the school, if I'm correct, right? You said in the school. But those other places that are allowing, I mean, it sounds like to me it's basically going to be for families who both parents work and they don't feel comfortable leaving their kids at home. They're going to have spaces available with good internet so that those kids then can gather in those places to do their schoolwork.
Yeah, that makes sense. And when I said we can't allow, I meant just a VAR sanctioned portion.
That's why I'd go back to say that, man, I think the safest place that those kids can be is exactly where they already are. And I'm with you, Susan, that if we're playing sports, I think we should be in school. The one hang up I have with that is that I'm sure that there are families out there that would say that are strict directly adherent to the saying that, hey, the county says we shouldn't be in school, we're in school, and it's going to cause them to have a lot of anxiety and fear about that. And so then I have a hard time forcing somebody to go against what they think is the safe thing for them to do. When the county's saying that you can't, but I have no problem allowing somebody to do something just because even when the county says they can't. Does that make sense? And so that would go back, harken back to what Kelly was talking about, the voluntary versus involuntary, right? I mean, there is an obligation that parents have their kids in school, and it's, you know, if we say we're gonna have school in Orange, then those parents are thinking, hey, you guys you're crazy, everybody's gonna die because everybody's in Orange. That's one thing versus saying, you know, somebody saying, hey, I'm in Orange and I will still want to play football. I'm with you in the sense that if we're playing sports, I think we should be in school. We should be in school goals. And so I look forward to that semester because, to Chris's point, you know, I want to revamp. I'd really like that Mill Valley deal where I would like the control more to be with us for what we do as opposed to just blanket following. I know they're the experts and I know they know stuff, but it really bothers me when the guy who's coming to be the expert can't even tell me how many high schools are in the county. You know, so I don't know how much. You know, I don't know. You know, for him to not know what schools are following. You know, what schools are actually doing what they're asking, because we're the only one who was doing anything that they were asking, really. I mean, as far as spectators and extracurricular activities. So to me, I'm looking forward, and I wish we could do it in 9 weeks, you know, or at the quarter, or do it midstream. But you know, I completely understand that we said we're going to do it for the semester, but I hate that we're the only ones keeping us from doing that. You know, there's not an outside body that says we can't do it. We're the ones deciding that we can't change course.
And this may all be moot because we may never go to Orange.
Right, I mean, that's true too. That's very true. Baldwin's at 1.7, I think 6606 is at 1.7% positivity rate.
Susan, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Can you say that again, please?
I just feel like we're speculating a lot because this may all be moot. We may never go to Orange, potentially.
True, but we were 0.3% from being,
So
from being away from it we were really, not last week, I'm sorry, the week before. And I questioned that as well. I was shocked that I think everybody who's following this thought, we're totally going to Orange.
Right.
I'm not sure what happened that we didn't go to Orange, but if you're looking at what their tools are, everybody pretty much thought we're totally going to Orange. And it was almost strange that we didn't. And that concerns me.
So in an effort to kind of wrap it up, I'll make a motion that we allow athletics in green, we allow athletics in yellow, we allow athletics in orange with spectators as we described with, was it 4 per rostered student? And Gary, help me if I'm wrong. Were we going to reduce it in orange, the number of spectators, or did we say we're going to do 4?
I think we said maximum.
Maximum of 4, dictated by the venue size.
Paul and Kelly, is this I'm not trying to squash it. Is this the right way to do it, or do we need to make a motion to rescind part of what we approved last week? Is either one okay?
Either way you do it, Andy, that's,
okay.
We'll follow what you guys
So
want.
I want to make it clear, if I'm only against the activities happening in orange, but I'm for the spectators happening in yellow, do I need to vote against this? And
it feels like 2 motions to me.
Yeah, okay. So, well, we already made the motion that we'd allow spectators through orange, and that passed.
Right.
Okay, so then we don't need to worry about spectators then.
But
The only question that there is at all is, right now you passed that you would have spectators through orange. The only question you really have tonight, we took that as a message to say, if we close, or all go to virtual, it's not closed, but we all go to virtual in orange, that athletics could continue in orange. That's the way we interpreted what the board voted on.
that's why I feel like we're already where you want to be. on the books.
Except, yeah, that's right, but I mean, but if, I don't want it to be where, I mean, I think we should all be on, I think we should, well, at least the majority of us should be where I want to be, as opposed to just me. I don't want to have snuck something through and then you feel like you voted for something that you.
Here's what I'm
politics
offering
fault.
as an alternative, is we all assume that we have the plan, that we're doing sports in Orange, and I make a motion rescinding that part, saying we're not doing activities in Orange. And that's what gets a vote. If you're against that, that's okay. I just wonder if it's cleaner based on what's on the books already. Because I feel like
Yes,
what
if
you're
you
proposing
read,
is already a thing.
yeah, the motion is already there on the record, in the minutes of what we voted for. The question is basically, not everyone understood what they were voting for in terms of the intention behind the motion. And again, I know this is a long discussion, but I'm glad we had it. It is. So the motion is already there. Really, I think the better thing to do is if now after having the discussion, if there's a motion to change that, then that's what should occur.
Okay, so just so I'm clear then, so the motion as it stands right now, and it sounds like it may change, is that we are playing sports through Orange with spectators through Orange. That's what it is right now.
Yes.
Okay.
That's our interpretation of that, of what was passed.
So if we did nothing, that's what would propagate on.
I think so.
Okay.
Which is not what I thought had happened, but I think it is what happened, so it's okay. It's okay.
I'm leaving.
So the thing that I need and the administrators need is, if that is not correct, if that's what, if you're good with that, you guys don't have to do anything.
Right.
If you are not okay with me saying, school, we're going all virtual, and I'm letting parents know we're going to be continuing to do extracurricular activities during Orange, that would be my message if we went to Orange right now. If that is not your intention, then you need to do something different tonight, or let it ride as it is. So really, from Phil's standpoint, I think Phil would prefer just, let's go with the message we've already got.
So I'll make the motion that we do not have activities in Orange. If you approve what we did last week, in other words, you would vote no on that.
Right.
And then it's either gonna pass and we're not doing it, or we'll be as we are. Okay? Okay. So
Okay. It has been moved that we do not.
Is that good? That was a motion?
Yes, you got it. Okay, now we have a counterpoint, that's good. But guys, and again, no one is trying to do anything nefarious or sneak, and that is why we brought it back up, because there was clearly a difference in how that motion was interpreted, and we want to make sure that it's clear however it turns out. So, thank you for the discussion. Andy has moved that we do not allow activities in Orange. Is there a second? Andy moved, Carrie has seconded, not allowing activities in the Orange. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed? Sorry, nay, that's right. Okay, motion carries 5-2. Thank you guys for having the clarifying discussion, because now we know, and knowing is half the battle, right?
And again, for my portion of that misunderstanding, I apologize.
It's okay.
Okay, we're very clear now on where we're going. And most certainly we had our interpretation of where we were, and now most certainly the board has spoken, so that's where we'll go from here. If hopefully we never go to Orange, but it can happen.
So on that note, can I request that we either in October or really early November have a equally vigorous conversation about our options for enrollment, our gating criteria, and allow us to have the opportunity to start from scratch, knowing what we know now, knowing what everybody else is doing around us. You know, Kelly, I keep coming back to your point about we keep looking at Douglas County, but some of us are going to Ottawa every day, some of us are going to Gardner every day. we need to have a broader perspective in some respects as well. So if we can get that on the agenda for October, I'm sure we're not going to forget about it, but.
Done.
Okay.
I feel like that should kind of be a special meeting, right? I mean, that's going to take a little time. I mean, yeah, that's right. Can we bring sleeping bags?
So what would you guys like here, and when would you like? I'm assuming Chris, you're wanting to do, is this pointed towards next semester?
Yes.
Or
I
immediacy?
think that's what I think he's talking about next semester, but starting the conversation.
Yeah, next semester. Yeah.
Here's my thing on that, and I'm not saying that isn't a good discussion to have. You just might not have great information in October about making a decision that would happen in January, especially as fast as this changes all the time.
Yeah.
Some things, the county may change that criteria. Mm-hmm. They talk like they are. I don't know if they will, but most certainly, Dan said at the meeting they're reconsidering that criteria. But so.
I think that's even a better reason to have it in October and to come up with something so that we can say this is what it is and give ourselves enough flexibility then, so that we're not playing minute by minute, but come up with a good plan that that at one end is no mask. If it's all over with, one end of that could be no masks, no nothing, and at the other end is shut down and come up with our own gating criteria that takes into account what the county says. That way, that it's already said and done, so we're not playing, pitch by pitch, trying to figure out what we're doing. But to your point, I think coming up, at least be starting that conversation in October timeframe to give us, because I don't think that's going to be like an hour discussion and be done.
And to that, I mean, the parents in this community have been vocal in a much appreciated way on my part anyway, about sharing information and different perspectives with us, sending us research, sending us websites to go check out. I mean, I would like to mimic that process and make this a more open book in terms of, and maybe we don't come to conclusion in October about those gating criteria, but we start that conversation, put a draft out there and say, community, what are we missing here that would help inform your decision making and get a better, more well-rounded approach for how you choose to enroll your students for the following semester.
And I think I tried to say this last week, and based on our previous discussion, I might have said something totally nonsensical. But after we're over the shock of this semester and getting into the flow and trying to figure out how we're progressing, I just think we need to start considering other metrics that we might incorporate. As you said, Phil, like the county is part of it, but maybe it's not 100% reliant as we have been. All with the understanding that this is a metric that guides us on these variations of orange and whatnot, and that if the county says you're done, we're obviously done.
Yeah, and I had a patron send me just kind of as an overview an article that was in the Kansas City Star. Maybe somebody saw it or not, but it was talking about Blue Valley school districts and how they've been doing it, and they're kind of getting into trouble. So I think we've been very open with our whole discussion process, and with the situation that we're in is really difficult, because here we are, basically, lay people trying to make all these decisions about public health, being given guidance that, sometimes seems like contradictory or questionable, or does it apply to us? And I think that we've done a nice job of being very open, so I want to say, I think we should continue to do that, and to Chris, to your point, I think we should start that discussion earlier rather than later, and come up with our own guidelines that we can control and have a good metric, and that takes into account all of those different deals.
So if we're going to start that, which is fine, I mean, that's totally the board's control. Before we get there, please let us know what you guys would like to have for that. What kind of background, what kind of information.
All the answers.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I would love to give you all the perfect answers. And most certainly, we've got plenty of people letting me know on a daily basis what those answers should be. And this is such a complicated issue, and you guys figure that out every meeting we go to. It's a complicated issue. It's not easy to do and figure out, because everybody's got a different opinion of where that stands. And what is the best thing to keep kids safe. And I've said as superintendent, and it is difficult for me to sit here. I know why we did all the stuff this summer working with the people we worked with, because as I said, I wanted us to open schools. And I knew who we had to satisfy in order to get permission to open schools. So we did all that work trying to make sure they were okay with, okay, if you do all these things, sure, open, we're not going to get in your way of opening. Then, of course, we had to go through, okay, so how are we going to decide when we close? What criteria? That's where the gating criteria came in. Most certainly, the data they use came from the medical people in this county, looking at what other examples of others around us had done, not in a complete vacuum, but looking at that. Most certainly, there are parts of that that are hard to say, why should that affect Baldwin's schools? Most certainly, and I've said this before, what determines us shutting something down or closing probably quicker than anything are positive cases right here in Baldwin, as we've seen just recently as today. That occurred, and most certainly that closes things down, or at least a program or a classroom very quickly is having that actual case right here. So I'm rambling on now, and I'm going to stop because I think we've spent enough time on this tonight. I appreciate the board's discussion, and I appreciate you clarifying that for us on what you actually wanted there. And that's what we'll move forward with. Most certainly, if we ever go to Orange, my only problem is calling you guys together to say, okay, are you really sure you want me to go ahead and close? It's not practical to say, okay, any Thursday that they say Orange, we're going to have a special meeting that night and determine, are we really going to do this Monday? It's not a practical thing.
Are you talking about like next semester as we get into that discussion?
That doesn't mean that couldn't be part of it, but right now, what we have right now, and what my actions are, my walking orders are, if it's Orange on a Thursday afternoon, we're not in school, we're not in-person school on Monday.
Right.
And
That's our reality. We're living what we've affirmed, and what has been voted on is that we're living week to week, because that's what we told people we were going to do. So now he knows what to do for next semester, and I agree with starting the conversation in October. That doesn't mean we arrive at the conclusion. I also think a special meeting about it, and not in the body of the full business meeting, not that we don't address it, but a work session, special meeting, I think would be appropriate. And we can, but I think starting on it sooner is probably better than later. So thank you for that idea. All right, we're going to move on to new business. 2 of the 3 items have been stricken from the agenda, from our first amendment to the agenda. So the only thing we have under this, Mr. Bland, is the BJHS handbook changes. Those were submitted. Did everyone have a chance to look over those? And does anyone have any questions? Carrie has a question, and Chris, I think.
Oh,
Okay.
I bet it's the same question, but you go ahead.
I bet
Okay.
so too. Well, I won't pull it up, but just that some of the language in there about tracking and stuff has changed. So will that just be crossed out, or? That was all.
Yeah, I believe that was updated. I'm not sure exactly which part you're referring to.
I think it was the 360 hours, and then I forget if I do have it. For the 6th graders, I think it said,
For their rotations, or for the lack of rotations, have to be self-contained. you go back, you feel comfortable going back to the documents since I'd already submitted that part to you.
I'm sorry, it was the 360 hours, because I don't, submitting the 360, because I don't think that that's the case, is it, Jana?
Yeah. Well, currently it states students will be expected to log 360 minutes of academic activities each day. So I think the question is what do we mean by log, if I'm understanding.
Yeah, that's right, because I just didn't want that to be so specific in there as a requirement.
I'd taken some language out that had been in there originally, but I can go back and relook that again if you'd like.
We could probably approve it pending those updated changes to reflect new Kansas Department of Education realities. I mean, if the board would be comfortable with that, because there's really just the two spots that were about the current reality when the kids were required to do the learning logs and now they're not. So that's kind of just easy change.
And I just point that out because it is such a confusing issue and it's a state requirement. So I just point that out just to make sure it's, not a issue for parents, because it was exciting when we didn't have to do that log.
I'm happy to go back and make this adjustment.
Thank you very much. It's a good outline of what we need to do.
Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, so just to clarify too, then with the 6th grade, that opening paragraph there, I feel weird talking to you over my shoulder like this, but I have to read at the same time. It says students will remain with one classroom teacher like a traditional elementary classroom. That'll then shift to the new reality, as you mentioned, where students will remain in one classroom, but the teachers will rotate or something to that extent.
Very, very close.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I had one more. It said, I'm sorry. It said something about students logging in, and I just wanted to clarify, just because my kid does remote. Remote grades 6 to 8. I thought it said that they had to check in. Students must check in with the teacher at least once a day for a meaningful lesson. They just have to check in for just a check-in, right?
A meaningful contact.
Okay, because the word lesson kind of got me a little nervous. Okay.
I can change it from lesson to contact. That's not an issue.
It's probably me. But.
Any other questions for Principal Bland? I move we accept the BJHS handbook changes as presented with the following 3 more changes that we just talked about to reflect the ever-changing climate. Those 3 changes are as follows. The word lesson for contact, meaningful daily contact or something along those lines versus the lesson verbiage. The removal of the daily learning log requirement, and the explanation that reflects the new reality of how 6th grade is working. So those 3 things. Is there a second? Second. Carrie is seconded. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
All those opposed? 7-0. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bland. Next, co-op report. Chris, Susan, and Tony are the go-tos on that. Chris, do you have anything for us?
It's pretty minimal. Just an update for you guys. The co-op is still down about 30% of paraprofessional positions. So again, putting that plea out there, if you're looking for a job, really like kids, there's lots of opportunities here for you. Just to also point out the fact that somewhat matches those remote learning percentages across all 3 of the districts that we serve as well. So it's not a gigantic problem that would normally be in a typical year where we're at down 30% of staffing because we have that chunk of kids that are in remote instruction anyway. So other than that, I don't think there's any other big updates. Oh, you conveniently drink water right when it's your turn to talk. Nice work. It was a pretty brief meeting from a couple weeks back, so that's the extent of it.
Anything to add or questions? Okay. Miscellaneous, just a couple of quick things here. As always, this is an opportunity for a board member to bring something forward if they like. I do want to, speaking of October planning, I do want to plant this seed tonight. Part of our role as a board is to provide a meaningful evaluation tool for our superintendent. And so the timeline of that is that it has to be done by, usually our practice has been is that it's done by the end of the year. I would like to, for those of you who were on the board last year, I would like to do it a little bit differently. I do not, my idea is that we'll begin that process next month. I won't go to a huge explanation, but I do want to make sure that the rubric that you are given is created in an online way versus a handout that then you manually type and send back to me. And I also want to format that so that you are anonymous, so that whatever scoring you give, I'm just receiving anonymous data from board members to then average. So we can give that quantitative piece to Mr. Dorothy. Here's the other piece for those of you who were on the board before. And I'm not sure, Andy, on your first time around, I'm not sure how you guys did this, but what we've been doing the last few years is also every board member has an opportunity within that rubric to provide comments. In other words, qualitative feedback. The issue with that is all of those comments have been listed out and turned over. But let's say I think Mr. Dorothy should spend more time working on handstands. Okay, and then that's listed with, weighted in the same way as Chris, who says, I would like you to engage in more professional development, whatever. He has no way to know if 7 people think he should be spending more time practicing handstands or if just one crazy person named Kelly thinks that, right? So we still need to be able to give that qualitative feedback, which is important. We need to be able to average that in a way that gives a quantitative touch point. So the reason why we're going to start next month, I'm going to give you guys the survey, or I'm going to email it to you. That'll start the process. You'll fill it out. You'll send it back to me. I won't know who said what. Easy part, quantitative part, easy peasy, average. The qualitative feedback, I will then retype, not knowing the source of what all the comments are. I will then reissue you a new survey with the list of all of those comments using a Likert scale, 1 to 5. To what extent do you agree with this sentence that 1 of 7 board members said? Then, if he has 100% response, the entire board evidently thinks I need to spend more time working on handstands. But if it's 1, then maybe that doesn't need to affect my action plan for what I'm going to bring back to you guys. So that's a way to make that qualitative data a little more meaningful, but that does require that the process stretches out a little bit. I didn't want to just, here guys, here you go, without some sort of context. So that will happen starting next month so that we can complete that. I can have the results to you guys, go over it with him as appropriate, and then we approve that final evaluation at our December meeting. We just have to start a little bit earlier to do it this way. So I just wanted to give you the heads up. That's all I have for miscellaneous. Does any other board member have any item that they would like to add in this time? Great. Superintendent's report.
Okay, just a couple things. First of all, as you know, we've reopened. Things have been going pretty decently, and then, of course, we've got our first confirmed case. We most certainly, our health staff did a good job of handling that and dealing with that situation, and then we got that communicated to as much as we could communicate that out to the correct people, those that were directly affected, and then most certainly anybody in the district can see that we did have a positive case. So anyway, we went through that, and I felt like that went well. Most certainly we got some questions from some folks, understandably. How does this work? Why wasn't this person considered? So on and so forth. I think Lisa's done a good job of answering those things and explaining that. Most certainly the county has gone through a process of contact tracing and how that should be done and who counts as a close contact and who doesn't. And so they have some pretty strict rules as they go through that. I have deferred to Lisa to do that. Most certainly, I don't think I should be in the middle of medical decisions. That should be decisions for Lisa working with the health department on how those things should work. So I have deferred those questions to Lisa when they come in. One thing I did want to point out to the board, last year on this date, if I'm completely accurate here, looking at my SO66 from last year, on this date, 1,366 students. That counts everybody, every head count we've got, 1,366. Today, head count that is at least on the website for all those same students, 1,326. So down 40. Some of that is due to a number of parents choosing to go homeschool, not remote, but homeschool on their own and do their own thing on that. So we did lose some there, but most definitely, as the trend has been for the last few years, our enrollment is dropping. We have 70 first graders. I mean, if you go down from the classes going down into elementary, the numbers have dropped off significantly from the day when we had 120 to 130 kids in a class. That is disappearing. So down the road, long term, this will mean some enrollment drops. It will mean some choices by the board and administration in the district about financial matters, because that will affect our finances. So anyway, that trend is continuing, although I would say we have the biggest kindergarten class this year that we've had in 4 years, but it's still not big. We were used to always having in the range of 90. It's 88, so we're close, but the last few years have been below that. So numbers are changing for Baldwin and for the future. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I can answer. Otherwise, with the hour, I'll move along here.
All right, I don't believe we have any more executive session time, correct? All right. I think all we have left to do is to approve the personnel report and adjourn. If someone would like to make that first motion. Thank you. Carrie has moved and Susan has seconded to approve the personnel report as presented. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. All those opposed, 7-0. Dr. Harvey? Phil has moved and Carrie has seconded that we adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all your work.